Hello, I'm Doug Geed. There could be a verdict today in the trial of the man accused of killing an NYPD detective from Long Island. The jury's set to begin deliberations this morning in Guy Rivera's trial. Rivera is accused of shooting Detective Jonathan Diller of Massapequa Park. It happened during a traffic stop in Queens back in 2024. Rivera faces life in prison without parole if convicted of the top charge, first-degree murder. Only in Newsday, Cesar Chavez's name could be removed from a Stony Brook dorm. The university named a building after the late civil rights icon in 2017. But a recent New York Times investigation found that Chavez allegedly sexually abused young girls within his farm workers movement. Students we spoke to say they're open to a new name for the dorm.
I would 100% support it. I think my biggest concern is just to keep the cultural awareness of the Latino community.
Now, a timeline on the renaming decision could take months. Plans to build a 140-foot cell phone tower on the grounds of an historic private school in St. James are on hold. The Nissaquag Village Planning Board says the proposal involving the Knox School clashed with coastal regulations. But since the project is key to improving cell coverage in the area, the board says it's open to modifications. Oyster farmers, they're looking to rebuild after this winter wreaked havoc on the industry. Ice-cold temperatures damaged both their crops and their equipment.
The ice came through like a bulldozer across our shallow plot of the Great South Bay, and it was the first year that we lost cages. It was ripping half-inch sinking line in half like a knife.
In 1 minute, what this means for local oysters ahead of the all-important summer season. Well, nearly $1 million is going to fight invasive species and plants across our island. The state grants will also help restore damaged habitats in places including Jerry Pond Park in Roslyn, the Muttontown Preserve, and the Hempstead Plains Preserve. All right, let's check out your Wednesday weather on this first day of April. Dry and warm today, but rain moves in on the first night of Passover. As you can see on the Futurecast, showers, maybe even a thunderstorm are possible this evening. Otherwise, mostly cloudy for most of the day with highs in the upper 60s in some spots, mild. Tomorrow, though, cloudy and much cooler. Temperatures only reaching the 40s. It gets warmer for the first half of the weekend, but we're tracking wet weather for Easter Sunday, then a mild start for the beginning of next week.
Long Island weather is brought to you by PTRC.
I'm Ken Bufa. The winter wreaked havoc on Long Island oyster crops, leaving farmers with damaged gear and lost revenue. Newsday went out to Hogs Neck Bay to see the cleanup and the aftermath from the harsh temps. As the sun rises over Hogs Neck Bay in Peconic, Grady Capel heads to his family's oyster farm to check out how bad the damage is.
So all that mud on top is exactly what you don't want to see. It kills everything. Kills the oysters too, though. Good news is, the water's so cold right now, I have a chance of saving them.
Brutal storms and a deep freeze this winter was a costly combination for many Long Island oyster farmers.
You can see how the oysters here, a lot of them are open, dead, they can't breathe.
Leaving them with dead oysters, damaged equipment, and questions about how to recoup the lost revenue and rebuild. Preliminary data from the industry survey shows a 33% crop loss and an estimated $2.4 million in gear replacement costs. Those numbers could still increase. Oysters can take up to 3 years to grow to market size. And with the summer season approaching, oyster farmers now have a lot to figure out.
I don't know what the future holds. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out exactly what we do, how we continue to work with the local customers in the immediate area that we have established and created relationships with, as well as the restaurants that are a little bit farther afield, like in New York City and the New York metro area.
Now I'm joined by Newsday Towns reporter Tara Smith, oyster farmer Keith Powell, and president of Long Island Growers Association Eric Kopel. Tara, I'd like to start with you. You've been reporting on this damage across the island. So what does this mean for Long Islanders this summer?
So consumers, as we start to head into the summer season and people get the hankering for oysters, they might be paying a little bit more for oysters this summer, and it might be a little bit harder to find them on restaurant menus and things like that as the oyster growers work to rebuild their crop and replace what was lost during this really brutal winter. So, you know, those dollar happy hour oyster deals might be a little bit harder to come by.
Now, Keith, you and your wife have a plot near Fire Island, correct? Walk us through what you saw and the kind of damage that you experienced and what this means for your business.
Well, we saw some of the worst losses that we've seen since we started. Usually we have a overwintering process that has mitigated damage in the future, but these was unprecedented ice. The ice came through like a bulldozer across our shallow plot of the Great South Bay, and it was the first year that we lost cages. It was ripping half-inch sinking line in half like a knife. We ended up seeing ground anchors bent like a paper clip. Thick, inch-long rods just decimated. The positive is that we have an opportunity to rebuild. This winter is over, and we're going to have to restructure the way that we do business in order to still maintain profitability.
Now, Eric, let's look at the big picture now. How is this going to impact the industry?
Well, so the modern oyster farming on Long Island is only about 10 years old. And the kind of winter we just had hasn't happened in at least 15 years. So this is the first time most of the farms on the island have seen this type of ice and this type of cold. And up until now, we've been growing at a nice double-digit rate every year when you look at the amount of oysters we harvest from our farms. Obviously, with the 33% crop loss, we're probably not going to see growth in our harvest numbers this year. We'll be lucky to keep them flat. They'll probably be down a little bit. So it's just going to be a little bit of a wait to get the pipeline of oysters to grow back, and then we'll be back on a trajectory.
Thank you so much for joining us. Newsday Towns reporter Tara Smith, oyster farmer Keith Powell, and president of Long Island Growers Association Eric Kopel. Thank you so much for sharing your story and this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Ken.
Thank you.
Now you can read more about this story. Just go to Newsday.com, click Get More below the Newsday TV video box.
All right, from the sea to the land, only in Newsday, harmful so-called forever chemicals have been found in produce grown on farms across Long Island. Virginia Huey takes a look at how they're getting there.
When we hear from scientists that we have an environmental crisis going on in relationship to PFAS, it's a call to action.
A recent study showing high levels of toxic forever chemicals known as PFAS in vegetables from 8 Long Island farms has raised concerns over how the toxin is getting into the crops.
PFAS is ubiquitous in the environment right now, and there are many potential entry points.
Debbie Aller is an expert in soil and plant sciences. She says researchers are looking at a variety of possible avenues, including compost, fertilizer, irrigation, and rainwater.
There are many other avenues that PFAS can enter the environment, like I said. So fertilizer products, pesticides, thinking in compost materials, compostable silverware, and compostable food packaging. In Cornell, we're looking into starting a study to actually try and measure PFAS in some of the products sold at big box stores. But other universities are looking at this as well.
Researchers and environmental advocates stress the contamination is not caused by farming practices, but reflects how widespread PFAS have become in the environment. They also point out the PFAS-contaminated vegetables in the study could have come from outside growers and distributors.
Farms on Long Island do import vegetables, especially off-season or in seasons where they want to have a full mix of things.
Environmental advocates say the findings highlight the need for stronger federal regulations to get at the root of the problem, which is the manufacturers of PFAS chemicals. But local farming experts say that'll be an uphill battle.
Trying to get those billion-dollar companies to change is going to be rough.
For Newsday TV, I'm Virginia Huey.
And you can read more about those PFAS chemicals in produce and how you might be able to avoid them by going to Newsday.com. Click Get More below the Newsday TV video box. Only in Newsday, it's a small venue that's hosted some of the biggest acts. Macy Eglund is checking out Westbury Music Fair over the decades, and today's Picture This.
Westbury Music Fair is celebrating 70 years of entertainment this summer, and Newsday has been there to document its many changes over the years.
Originally, it was a tent, and so that meant it was only open during the summer.
1956, a very different look than what you see today. A striped tent with room for 1,700 people.
The owners of the place were very savvy. They realized that Long Island in the 1950s was expanding. You had all these folks from the city coming out here, and they didn't want to go back to see shows in the city. Just like today, it's expensive, the parking was bad. So Westbury was really the venue.
10 years later, the tent came down and walls went up to create a fully enclosed theater with a stage that set it apart.
It's one of the coolest venues in the United States because it's theater in the round. The stage rotates.
A subtle rotation in the middle of the 360-degree layout, one of the last remaining spinning stages in the nation.
I think that's the trademark, and I think that's one of the things that keeps people coming back year after year.
This venue offers an intimate setting, and every seat has a great view. Some big names have graced this stage.
Who hasn't been there? I mean, I think Elvis is like the only person who hasn't been there, but to name some names, Frank Sinatra was there, Bob Hope, James Brown, Bruce Springsteen.
From Broadway shows to music acts, comedians, and more, Westbury Music Fair has evolved with the times.
And now they're all over the map. They'll have disco acts, they'll have R&B acts, they'll have country acts. They really know their audience.
And so the stage spins on. Reporting for Newsday TV, I'm Macy Eglund.
Been there many times. Great spot. You could watch more Picture This segments on Newsday.com. Click Get More below the Newsday TV video box. You can see more on all of these stories on Newsday.com. Watch us streaming anytime on Local Now, YouTube, and the other services you see here. I'm Doug Geed. Thanks for watching, and more local news straight ahead.
Newsday is your source for total coverage of high school sports on Long Island, from the field to the court, with the kind of in-depth analysis you can only get from Newsday. Now streaming on Newsday TV.